Hey, today we're getting into one of my favorite areas of world history, and this is the heretical movement that takes place in what's called the High Middle Ages, around 900 to about 1000 A.D. Um, and what we mean by heretical movements or heresy is it's basically if you have a belief that does not fit with accepted church doctrine, you are a heretic. You don't completely agree with the church's dogma, and so you are a heretic. Um, Most of these are very, very small groups of people and some of them will have slightly different ideas uh, than the church has. The Catholic Church still, we haven't created the Protestant movement yet, and we won't do that until after this class is over in 1519. But this is a direct threat to the church, though. They're trying to gain more and more members for Christianity, for the church, and they're going to clamp down pretty hard at times on these heretics, sometimes for religious reasons, sometimes for political, and even sometimes economic issues. Uh, and, you know, it's a risk, especially as some things are changing that we'll talk about. These things might cause church membership to fall, and we really don't want that. And so, like I said, this really jumps up during the High Middle Ages. Um, there were some tiny heretical people. I don't want to say movements during the early Middle Ages, those so-called Dark Ages, but they don't really kick off very much. Um, and so a big thing, though, is that really jumps these off is lay literacy. More and more people that are able to read for themselves, and they're able to interpret the Bible for them, the Christian Bible for themselves. That takes that interpretation out of the hands of the church, and you know that's a challenge. And you know we have that today. We have all kinds of different Christian denominations in the United States. We have other religious denominations too, but just within the Christian church, we've got Baptists and Methodists and Catholics and Episcopalians. We have all kinds of different, and each one of these are all interpreting the Christian Bible largely the same, but they have slightly different ideas about different parts of it. And there's way more than I even mentioned, but in you know, with the exception of the Catholics, any of those people put in the High Middle Ages, those would have been heretics. They were not interpreting the Bible the same way that the Catholic Church did. And you know, as we see, that was a threat to the Catholic Church. So, some of these, sorry, I got to kind of throw in a little bit. Some of these are going to stem from disappointments, disagreements with the church. Some of them will be different interpretations of the church, but some of the early ones are going to be disappointments of church reform movements. One of those movements was started in 1050 and was led by the papacy, the Pope, in an effort to increase morality in Europe. And a major one of those reforms is reforming the church itself. There was a rule that required priests to be celibate, and this started back in the 300s and the 400s. So in the 300 AD, 400 AD, the church is going to start increasingly requiring priests to be celibate. You cannot have a wife, you can't have children, anything like that. But around 1000 AD, lots and lots of priests, Catholic priests in Europe, had wives, and many of them lived openly with their wives. And they weren't really prosecuted for this. The church, you know, basically ignored their own law. and allowed these people to live openly in marriage. And some Gregorian reformers wanted to start enforcing that rule again because the church wasn't abiding by its own rules, and that's a problem. Another disappointment that people have was this practice of simony, Simoney. And the idea there is that you could literally purchase a church office. If a bishop or an abbot of a monastery comes open, your family might purchase that office for you so that they secure, your son into becoming a bishop. This is against church doctrine, and you're not supposed to be able to do this, but people did, and so this is, a disappointment. This is a reaction to that. Sorry. Most of these groups, though, they do keep to themselves and are typically found accidentally. One of the first larger groups of heretics was discovered in 1022 in the French town of Orléans, spelled Orleans. The King of France stumbled upon a small group of heretics. They practiced a severe self-discipline. They withdrew from the world as much as possible because they saw the world as corrupt and bad. And also they embraced an idea of dualism, that they were largely Christians, but they added to the sort of accepted dogma in arguing that there was a good God and an evil God. And all of these people were executed for heresy because that is not an accepted church dogma. Another really entertaining one pops up in 1051. And in this one, a small group of heretics was discovered, and they were convicted on the basis of something called the chicken test. One idea among some heretics, not all heretics shared this, but one idea among some heretics was the idea of reincarnation. When you die, you come back, and sometimes you come back as something else, not necessarily human. And so a lot of, the heretics that bought into reincarnation thought that, hey, you die as a human, you come back as something else, possibly. And for that reason, they refused to kill any kind of animal. They were super vegans, which is fine. But they refused to kill any kind of animal, and because the off chance that animal might contain a human soul. And so, in the chicken test, heretics or suspected heretics were asked to kill a chicken because you may be killing a human soul while doing so. And if you don't kill the chicken, then you're judged a heretic and you are killed. And so the folks in that instance in 1051 refused to kill the chicken, and so those people were burned at the stake, which is a really dramatic response to not wanting to kill a chicken. But one of my favorites, and he is super confrontational and just a wild guy, is a monk, former monk, named Peter of Bruis. It's Bruis. He has some dramatic differences of opinion with the Catholic Church. One of his big ones is he rejected the divine inspiration of the Old Testament, claimed that the Old Testament was just written by people. God or any kind of higher power had zero to do with it. And that's, even today, that's among Christians, that's very much against dogma. Most Christians that are Christians think that the Bible was divinely inspired, and here's Peter of Bruis all the way back in the 1050s saying that it's not. He also rejected the idea of the crucifix as a worthy symbol of Christianity. And when he preached, he traveled around a lot of France, and when he preached, he tried to get his followers to round up all of the crucifixes in the area that they possibly could, and they would burn them on giant bonfires. He does have an argument for this. His claim was that the church was becoming too materialistic. It was becoming too much based on, needing things, needing buildings for churches, needing objects of worship like crucifixes. And he wanted to dematerialize all worship. He wanted to get rid of crucifixes. He wanted to get rid of churches, basically. He wanted nothing physical at all. He wanted basically, his idea was that people should be able to worship God wherever they are and not needing anything to do so. One of my favorite parallels from this comes from King of the Hill. And if you ever watched that show, you're familiar with the character Lucky. And in one of his engagements with Uncle Hank, he says, "Me, I don't go to church. Church goes with me. I'm worshiping when I'm drinking a beer, digging a hole, or fishing for trout." And that's kind of Peter of Bruys's idea, that you should be able to worship anywhere and it shouldn't be dependent on a church or a crucifix or anything like that. But also, Peter has some more ideas. He also encouraged his followers to attack monasteries, monks, and this idea of the monastic lifestyle where people were not marrying and producing children as they had been instructed to do so in the Bible. Peter disagreed with that whole idea and would drag monks, and his followers would drag monks out of the monasteries and force them to marry. Likewise, as most people know, Catholics tend to not eat meat on Fridays, or on Good Fridays. And it's on regular Fridays, I'm sorry. And so Peter and his followers would walk around with giant hunks of meat on Fridays and get up in the faces of Catholics and just devour all of this meat. As sort of an in-your-face kind of thing. Around 1130, Peter was in southern France, and preaching like he did, he was encouraging his followers to go out and round up crucifixes and throw them on the fire. And he and his followers had constructed this really big raging bonfire that was consuming all of these crucifixes. Being a little bit too in your face, many of the local Catholics in the area were sick of him doing this. He was destroying their stuff and their objects, their religious objects, and so they grabbed Peter himself and threw him on the fire, and he was killed. There's all kinds of these different heretics promoting different ideas. Most famous is in 1519 when Martin Luther he puts his 95 Theses on a Catholic door in Germany, I believe, and it's a different argument than the Catholic Church is putting out here. And so Martin Luther literally was a heretic. He creates the Protestant Church. They are protesting ideas of the Catholic Church. So there's a lot of these heretics, and next video we're going to talk about how the church really sometimes gets very, very confrontational in dealing with these and in removing them from existence, basically.